The 469th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast, coming at you here on a Wednesday night. We do want to wish everybody a happy new year. Unfortunately, the 2025 calendar year did not get off the way that we wanted it to. Carolina falls tonight at Louisville, 83-70. And there's a lot to unpack on the court, and then a lot to unpack off the court. And that's kind of been the theme so far this year. When Carolina loses, there is the initial frustration of the loss and what played into the loss. But something that has become a common theme, and I think tonight it's hit its boiling point so far for this year, has been a lot of anger towards the head coach and a lot of blame going on the shoulders of Hubert Davis. And we'll talk about that as well. But we'll go ahead, get right into this recap, talking about this defeat. The Heels fell, as I mentioned, 83-70. They're now just 8-6 on the year and 1-1 now in league play. This was a game that was 70-69 at the under 4 media timeout in the second half, and Carolina got outscored 13-1 down the stretch. You extend that out. Carolina didn't make a field goal the last 5 minutes and 9 seconds. Another game where late game execution just not there on both ends. You're down 70-69. You fail to get a defensive rebound. Same possession, foul a three-point shooter. You go from down 1 to down 4. Your next two possessions, Van Allen Lubin basically commits 2 turnovers. One by throwing it into the backcourt, and then one trying to shoot a one-legged turnaround jump shot that barely drew rim. And then you go from down 4 to down 7. And so all that happened as Carolina wasn't able to execute down the stretch, but it was all highlighted by, yet again, another slow start. Carolina trailed 37-31 at the half. The 31 points were tied for a season low and a half this year. They also scored 31.5 against Georgia Tech. They shot 32% in the first half, the second worst shooting percentage in a half this year. And you can imagine that at some point Carolina trailed by double digits. That was the case. So yet another game against a power conference opponent that this team found themselves down double digits. Ian Jackson, basically all by himself, brings them back in the second half. But ultimately it falls short as Carolina loses. It wasn't tonight was nowhere near a must win, but tonight would have been a really nice win to add to a resume that now shows a 2-6 record in quad one, as opposed to if you would have won tonight, you're 3-5. And believe me when I tell you, that's a big difference when you're trying to impress a committee room that'll determine teams that make the tournament come Selection Sunday. Especially since right now Carolina has no quad two games on their resume. We'll get there at some point, but right now they've got a lot of games in quad one, no games in quad two, and tonight was another evidence that this team can play with good teams, but they can't consistently beat good teams, and that's not a good thing to be said about you going into January.
Yeah, I mean, it basically leaves the door open for this team being a team that's going to be right on the bubble again this year. We thought maybe with the performance against UCLA and then what you saw, at least offensively against Campbell, that this was a team that may have sort of put that behind them. They were going to take care of business in conference play. And look, this is the first conference game. It's on the road. It's at a place where you have historically had issues winning at it. When you've won there, it hasn't necessarily been easy. And I do think this Louisville team is probably a lot better than people are going to give them credit for. At the same time, the game was there for you once again. And it really comes down to, as you said, lack of execution down the stretch. And again, it's your front court that kills you. Jalen Withers is not a player that should be on this team. We have kind of been beating around the bush at that. We haven't really made it that obvious that we don't think that he is someone that helps this team at all. Since the NCAA tournament game, this dude is killing this team. He should not play the rest of the year. It's just that simple. The dude literally every time he is on the floor, he is creating an issue for Carolina. And then Vin Allen Lubin, I mean, just his worst game of the season, you could argue, with the important turnovers. As you mentioned, throws it into the backcourt for a backcourt violation. One of the worst turnaround jump shots I've ever seen in a scenario where he did not have to take the shot. Still 10 seconds on the shot clock. For some reason, he shoots that. And the worst issue, the worst moment from him tonight probably was the foul on Chucky Hepburn on a long three-pointer that, look, if he ends up knocking that shot down, there's nothing that you can do about it. I don't even know if I'd want to guard going out there to try to contest that with how far behind the three-point line he was. So, I mean, look, the late game execution is something that is frustrating. The fact that Ian Jackson didn't touch the ball as much as you would have liked him to down the stretch of the game is definitely head-scratching on the offensive end of the floor. But it really comes down to, I thought, the two possessions on the defensive end of the floor that changed this game was not getting a defensive rebound for Jalen Withers and the foul by Vin Allen Lubin. And so you point once again to this front court that right now is just one of the worst in all of college basketball.
Well, it's just their inconsistency flares up at the most inopportune times. I mean, Vin Allen Lubin had 9 rebounds tonight, tied a season high, was 3 of 4 from the field. Did a lot of really good things, I thought, for Carolina in this game. But, whenever you needed him, or he was 3 of 4 from the foul line, whenever you needed him to make a big play or just do what he's there to do, didn't do it. Jalen Withers, look, man, it's really hard to beat up college kids. It really is. He hasn't recovered mentally from what happened in the tournament a year ago. And to be honest, that was my biggest fear all along going into this year, because he heard it. And I'm not going to say that he didn't hear it from someone like me who made it very known how ticked off he was at him for having the worst 30 seconds maybe of his basketball life at the most inopportune time. But you've seen this guy now in 2 big spots. You go to tonight, and then you go to the Florida game. And in the Florida game, it was right in front of where we were sitting on Media Row. Man, that guy is in position. If he gets a rebound, who knows? Florida, I think definitely Carolina wins. Tonight, you don't really know, but tonight felt like if Carolina ever got the lead, if they ever got over the hump, they would never look back. And that was something they were never able to do. They tied the game a handful of times, most notably at 61. They got within one, most notably again 70-69. Never once took the lead and never once made Louisville panic. Oh crap, we got to go get the lead back. That never happened. And the front court, we've lamented it. It wasn't put together the way that you wanted it to, the way that you needed it to. But we thought, okay, they could still, with where this league is at, could manage their way through it. And they maybe still can. Not a good sign that your first road game of the year against a not so very big Louisville team, your front court got embarrassed, got owned. You lose the rebounding battle. You had not really anywhere of an offensive rebounding presence for the entire game, and it just culminates in a frustrating loss that could be the sign of what we should expect more often than not from this group. This group's more talented than Louisville. They have more individual talent. They're not better coached. They don't play as hard. And they were out executed, out efforted in the most important part of the game. And as a fan, it's a real hard pill to swallow, but that's the reality of the situation. Also, Carolina is now 1-3 on New Year's. I know that's not a high number of games to be played on this holiday, but let's try to quit playing on New Year's. Now, granted, this was the first time that they had lost on New Year's since 1943, but I tried to wake up today with a bunch of positive energy and a great mindset for 2025, and well, I'm already ready for 2026. Let's take a look at the box score. Not a pretty one for the Tar Heels. They shoot 40% from the field. They were 24 of 60. Louisville was 45%. They were 26 of 58. This is where it gets frustrating. Carolina didn't shoot the ball well. That was probably expected from the outside. They were 4 of 16 from 3, 25%. Louisville was just 6 of 26, 23%. You held them 6 percentage points lower than their average. And we talked about how important it was to defend the three-point line. Outside of Rain Smith, you did a really good job defending the three. He was 4 of 10 with 17 points off the bench for the Cardinals. Free throws, a big difference in this game. Carolina more efficient. They were 18 of 23, which comes out to 78%. But Louisville was more aggressive. They got to the foul line 39 times. They were 25 of 39. That works its way out to 64%. 12 Carolina turnovers led to 14 points for Louisville. 8 Louisville turnovers led to just 8 points for Carolina. I mentioned the rebounding. Carolina lost the battle of the boards tonight, 43-37. 33-30 they lost on the defensive glass. 10-7 they lost on the offensive glass. They got outscored second chance points, 11-2. They got outscored in terms of bench points, 22-10. But Rain Smith led the way there with 17. Kind of expected that. Points in the paint in favor of Louisville, 38-36. Both teams had 7 fast break points. Carolina with 11 assists on 24 made baskets. Louisville with 14 assists on their 26 made baskets. The game was tied 4 times. There were 2 lead changes. Ultimately, though, Carolina led for just 24 seconds, and it's really hard to win at home, on the road, wherever it is, when you lead for just 26 seconds. We now typically play an audio cut from Hubert or read a quote from Hubert. As of the time that we went live, none of that stuff was published, made available. I guess with the holiday, not a lot of media on hand for tonight's game. We're just a little behind getting that stuff out there on the internet and on Twitter. I did, though, listen to his post-game interview with Jones Angel on the Tar Heel Sports Network. And the first thing he got asked about was, once again, the lack of late-game execution. And I think this is where frustration is starting to set in for Carolina fans. Because if you go back and listen to his answer, he talked about, well, it was a 40-minute issue, not a 5-minute issue. And in totality, he's not wrong. I mean, if Carolina plays the way they play in the second half, where they score 39 points, shoot 50% from the field, Carolina wins the game. That's not what happened. But we know that conference play is so much about winning games late. And the best teams find a way to do it. This is now another game that this team was there with 4 minutes to go and just fell flat on its face. The Kansas game, up 4, 3 minutes to go, lose. Michigan State, up with 2 minutes to go, lose. The Florida game, up, 5, 4 minutes to go, lose. Tonight, you don't lead, but you're down a point. You get the initial stop because you force a miss, but you can't get a rebound. You can't go down and try to give yourself a chance to take the lead. And as much as you're relying on guys that like freshmen, Drake Powell, Ian Jackson to make plays for you, you've got some core guys from your roster a year ago that are back. Most notably, your All-American R.J. Davis. You've got Elliot Cadeau. There was no Seth Trimble tonight, but guys that have been in your system now for 4 years that should be able to make winning plays. And for whatever reason, he has not done a good enough job to put them in winning plays. And I thought his lack of answer tonight with Jones Angel might be a sign and evidence that even he doesn't know why his team is struggling to close out quality opponents, whether it's at home, on the road, or on a neutral floor.
Well, I think the answer probably just points to more frustration with the fact that they just aren't starting games fast, more than him not having an answer. I think, honestly, at some point, you just kind of look in the mirror and ask yourself, what the hell can I do differently that will end up changing the way this team starts games? I don't really know if there's anything you can do. At this point, I think this team is just comfortable with letting teams get out to a fast start, and then we'll turn up the defensive intensity. And again, we've talked about it so many times. The one thing that you can do to counter it is to go with the full court press. And that just does not seem to be something that Carolina wants to do. Now, I will say that if there was a night that you would agree with the choice not to full court press, it would be tonight because, of course, Ted Valentine is the head referee. And what ends up happening? It turns into a foul fest. That was exactly what we saw the entire night. And so I think that certainly could have possibly been something that would have allowed Carolina to get out to a faster start. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many times you've changed the lineup. There's no way for this team to start faster because the mindset on this team is just not where it needs to be. So who knows? Maybe that is on Hubert Davis. Maybe that's something where, he's not getting the guys ready and a new voice would be able to do that. But part of it, I think also is just that these players just aren't good enough. They're showing you that as the year goes along. Yeah, there's talent there, but clearly they're not as talented as we thought they were. Especially those guys in the front court. And that is what is killing Carolina the most. Is that teams are just able to exploit that. This is not a very big team, but you saw at times in this game just how easy it was to get to the basket early in the game. That's what sort of set the tone for Louisville was a couple of easy dunks early in the game, and it sort of settles them in. And one of the things that you mentioned was that, this was a team that didn't shoot the ball well from three. Every three that they needed to hit, though, they hit. It wasn't the same way for Carolina. So, it's just a team that right now gets off to slow starts every time we see them. They're not clutch down the stretch of games. They've had one game where they've been able to really pull it out. Actually 2 if you count the Dayton game. So yeah, 2 games where they've really been able to pull it out. But this is one of those teams that I just feel like right now is a rather average group that it's just really going to be trying to limp their way into the NCAA tournament because they're not making the plays when they need to early in the game or late in the game.
Stat of the game, I ultimately went with the free throw shooting. It was one of our keys to the game. We pointed out how much Louisville fouled, and this showed up in the second half. Both teams were in the bonus before, shortly after the under 12 media timeout. But they make 7 more free throws than you make, and they took 16 more free throws than you took. That comes down to a mindset. That comes down to a level of aggression. On top of the fact that they took 26 threes, 10 more than you took because you only took 16. And, I think you got to credit. I thought Ian Jackson in the second half, as much as any guy, just said, I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to go to the rim and I'm going to invite contact and I'm going to draw fouls and I'm going to go to the foul line and make free throws. And he did that. He was 7 of 11 from the charity stripe. But, I thought that was something that, RJ could have been better at doing, just 3 free throws tonight. Elliot Cadeau, just 2 free throws tonight. Now, granted, Cadeau fouled foul troubles all night long before ultimately fouling out, but I thought they were nowhere near as aggressive as they should have been going into the game as stats would have told you they should have been. And I thought Louisville was just relentless putting pressure on the rim, their ability to impact the game from an offensive rebounding perspective, drawing fouls in that scenario was very vintage Carolina-esque. And I think that's one thing that's got to be really frustrating for long time Carolina guys. When you're watching this front court get exposed, you're watching teams do to us what we've primarily did to teams for 60 plus years, and especially under Roy Williams. Like, you look at the Florida game, you look at the Louisville losses, their ability to overwhelm with offensive rebounds and either getting them and converting them or drawing fouls is what Carolina's done as a hallmark for years.
Yep.
And you just don't have that. And you don't really have a way to stop teams from doing that, which is double frustrating. So, it just really culminates in just a place where, as a fan, you're kind of just at a loss for words, because quite simply, outside of the 8-20 year, and then you want to maybe look at the 20-17 year, we haven't seen this. Like, you look at the year in the COVID where Carolina was bad. Carolina was bad because, more than anything, they were just unhealthy. I mean, they lost their entire backcourt at one point that year to injuries for extended periods of time. That team had a front court. They just, the other issues really plagued them. And if you remember, that team entered the ACC tournament, and many people thought they were going to make a run because the way that team had grown and progressed and developed over the year. Carolina's not even capable of doing that this year. Like they are what they are. Like, what we have seen is what they're going to be every time on the floor. And one of the things that we've grown accustomed to is watching this team, this program develop as the year moves along. And I'm not saying that Carolina has peaked in January, but I don't know if there's another level of play that they can reach that's much higher than what we've seen in the first 2 months of the season.
Now, your peak play is probably what you saw against UCLA, where RJ Davis is making shots to go along with Ian Jackson leading you and scoring. That's probably the best that you're going to see, unless when Seth Trimble comes back, his shot returns to him, and all of a sudden Carolina is a team that's scoring 90 a game and simply nobody can stop them. That's the only way that I think they can really take things to another level, because it's time to give up on the 5 spot. They are not getting better there because there is zero consistency. Whenever you start feeling good about a guy that's playing that spot, they give you a reason not to. Now, I will say this. After tonight, you need to see Jalen Washington play more there. You got to live and die with him, because Vin Allen Lubin, like, look, man, it's just not good enough. I'm sorry. You're just not bringing enough to this team right now. Tyjon Claude, you are a liability offensively, and they refuse to play James Brown. So I think that turns into a spot where you just have to trust Jalen Washington. You trust him enough to put him in the starting lineup, and he's probably been the guy that's hurt you the least at that position in the last few games. So that's probably the guy that you end up having to roll with. But yeah, you're right. This is a team that is not going to be able to protect the rim. It doesn't matter if they're in position to be able to corral defensive rebounds. In late game scenarios, they're probably going to give up important offensive rebounds. So you have to figure out a way to, when you give up those important offensive rebounds, come back and create another really strong defensive possession to either create a turnover or hopefully come away with a defensive rebound that just kicks your way. And I mean, I think offensively, you just have to look at it as it's an NBA look. Because you want to go smaller, they simply are just not going to have any sort of constant movement offensively. The screening game is not going to be there because they don't trust their big men to be able to screen. Jalen Washington showed you why you can't trust them to screen, although I'd love to see the replays of those. We never saw them, so not sure if those were moving screens or not. It's just, this team is a very ugly basketball team to watch. They'll grind out a lot of games in conference play. It's going to happen because there are some really, really bad teams in the ACC. So Carolina will take advantage of those teams, but they're going to be a middle of the road team in the ACC. Depending on who they beat, they will sneak into the NCAA tournament, and they will probably be gone in the first round. That's pretty much what this team looks like right now. And that sucks because Ian Jackson is going to go to the NBA, and that means that there won't be any room for him to have any sort of success here. And, you know, RJ Davis, his career is going to come to an end with a pretty big thud. But with the way that this team is built, and you can, that's up to you to decide who you put that blame on. Do you put the blame on Hubert Davis for not being able to get a big man in the portal? Or do you put the blame on the fact that the NIL money simply isn't there and you're hoping in the future that it is? I think that's the conversation you should be having about this team, because this roster just ain't good enough.
Getting more thoughts, more takeaways from the loss. Want to jump back into the lack of late game execution, and I think what's really maddening and frustrating is you look at the course of the 4 years, and it's an up and down resume where the first 3 months of Hubert Davis's coaching career, when Carolina got into close games, they got beat. And then they got hot the last 6 months. They won a bunch of close games on their way to the national championship. The very next year, and I feel like at some point we'll start comparing this year's team to the team 2 years ago. That team 2 years ago could not find a way to win a close game. And then you go to last year. I mean, how many games did Carolina grind out at the under 4 minute timeout? And they found ways to win. And now here we are once again. You've got close wins, but they're close wins after comebacks, which they still count, but it's not like these games were tightly contested and then you didn't make plays. Like, no, these were games that you were still coming back from deficits and going on to win the game. They don't know who they want to run their offense through when they get to that time in the ball game, which doesn't make a lot of sense when you've got an All-American ACC Player of the Year on your roster like RJ Davis, and you've got this budding superstar who's got an NBA bag and then some, Ian Jackson. And I think Hubert Davis's late game coaching has been horrendous. Like, where is, even if you're going isolation, I think he's doing a really bad job getting these guys the looks that they want. Like the shot that Van Allen Lubin took tonight with 10 seconds on the shot clock is as bad a shot I've seen someone take with the game on the line in 15 years. Because
yeah, but I mean, how much do you put that on Hubert? I mean, that's a kid. That's honestly, that was a shot from a kid that I don't know what he thought. I don't know if he thought it was later in the shot clock. That's a play that you do not draw up as the head coach. You're saying, I mean, he's saying exactly what we were saying. Why the hell would a guy that has not made a turnaround jump shot in the post the entire year decide, let's throw that up with 10 seconds on the clock when you can kick it back out to one of your guards that has shown consistently that they can either create off the bounce or create enough separation to be able to make shots? I don't understand it. I thought that his decision-making was just questionable, but that's been every big. You go back to, there are multiple games this year, early in the season, the game against Kansas, a horrible jump shot choice by Jalen Washington. Jalen Withers had a bad one in that game as well. Withers has had multiple throughout his entire career here. And Lubin, tonight, it's just, it doesn't make sense that these big men decide, I want to try to take the game over. No, you are not good offensive players. You suck. You are some of the worst offensive bigs I have ever seen in my life put on a Tar Heel uniform. So let the guards take over. That's what you have to do late in games. I mean, who do you think got you back into the game? It was Ian Jackson. So play through Ian Jackson. Hell, you can live with RJ Davis taking shots. Those are the only two guys that you should be looking at to take shots. You want to play isolation basketball, then that's who you play isolation basketball through. And it's on the players to be able to get it into their hands. But there are guys that honestly on this roster at certain times, it feels like they are selfish and they feel like they are trying to make plays. Guys, let the best players on the team control you on the offensive end of the floor. Because if not, it's going to be like tonight where this team just ain't making any shots down the stretch.
Ian Jackson is your best player. And that's become evident. He's now scored 20-plus points in 3 straight games. He's now averaging over, I think, 18 over the last 7. And he's your best talent. You go back to the UCLA game when he helped bring you back, but at the closing minutes of the game, nowhere to be found.
Mm-hmm.
And then tonight, he's nowhere to be found. And I don't think he's afraid of the moment. Like, there are some guys that when the moment gets too big, they shy away. That's not him.
He's not passing. It's not like they're giving him the ball and he's giving it up. No, he's literally not getting the ball at all.
So I think Hubert's got to do a much better job demanding where the ball is, and really demanding who shoots the ball. Like, we could say, well, how much blame is it on him? I think one thing that he was so good at last year, and he hasn't been so far this year. Dude, last year when players messed up, when players screwed up, guess what happened? They went to the bench. There's no accountability for guys when they make game-altering mistakes. And that's why I think there's just this freedom of or there's just lackadaisical play, because it's, well, I can go out there and I can screw up and coach isn't going to get mad at me. Coach isn't going to yell at me. Coach isn't going to run me in practice. He had that last year, I felt like. It does not appear he has it this year.
Well, he doesn't. No offense. Who are you? You're putting them on the bench for a guy that's going to come in and make a similar mistake. Because, like you say, okay, well, Jalen Withers makes a mistake, put him on the bench. Okay, well, then guess who you're putting in the game? Cade Tyson. Dude, Cade Tyson's going to make a similar mistake because he's not talented enough.
Well, I've already said, though, and we'll have to talk about this here in just a second, like tonight was impossible. He should play 6 players at the most. Like, that's where you're at.
Yeah, here's the thing that I do think that won't be talked about a lot, but that really hurt in this game. When you lost Drake Powell to foul trouble, that changed your whole strategy, because what ended up happening was, and I believe if Drake doesn't foul out of the game, they probably leave the lineup as it was at that time, which I believe, if I remember correctly, right before that, it was Carolina basically with 3 true forwards on the floor. Granted, Jalen Withers would have still been in the game, but you would have had RJ controlling everything, and Ian Jackson would have been playing off of him. That should be how it should be down the stretch. Because for some reason, I mean, dude, at this point, Elliot Cadeau trusts other guys on this team too much. You should not trust your teammates. Like, that is a crazy thing to say, but you shouldn't. The only guys that you should trust to make plays down the stretch are Ian Jackson and RJ Davis. You bring it across half court, you give it to one of those 2 guys, or you don't play. That's the mindset.
Well, and I mentioned, I think we're at a point now where I think Carolina should play 5 or 6 guys. You couldn't tonight because of the whistle. And look, I tweeted it out. I'm not going to run from it. The officiating was horrendous. That was as poorly officiated a basketball game I've watched this year. And I've watched plenty to say that statement profoundly. 2 things. A, good players adjust to bad officiating. I felt like we never did that. Once the game got called tight, I felt like, Cade Tyson picked up 2 rebounding fouls trying to reach for a ball he had no chance of getting. None whatsoever. I mean, stupid. That's just low basketball IQ. Yeah. We got lucky that Louisville left so many points at the charity stripe, but this is where the lack of depth on this roster proved costly, because these games are going to happen in conference play, especially on the road. You're going to get in a game where your best players or your most important players are going to be faced with foul trouble. Tonight, that guy was Elliot Cadeau and Drake Powell. You've got to be able to overcome it. That's what good teams do. And maybe this is just another example, 27,000, that this is not a good basketball team. But the lack of depth tonight that is not developed was on hand, was evident. Because Elliot Cadeau wasn't sensational tonight, but I felt like Carolina did miss his presence because of his ability to create offensive opportunities for others. And then with Drake Powell fouling out, that meant Jalen Withers played 16 minutes, which was probably 16 too many. Cade Tyson played 15 minutes. That was probably 15 too many. But yet, with the way that the game was called, you needed those guys, and so we know that Carolina has won playing 5 or 6 guys before. You went a real long way doing that. We know it's not sustainable. And tonight, Carolina's inability to be able to play 1 through 10 showed up in a big way because our role players did not play their role as well as Louisville's role players when they got into foul trouble as well.
The thing that's just amazing is you go back to the summer and especially the preseason. And we sat here and we told you that we thought this might be the deepest team that we've seen in a long time at Carolina. I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, there's depth. It's some of the worst talented depth I've ever seen. I don't understand why we thought at that time. I mean, I had concerns about certain guys, especially down low. But, I mean, you're right. And that's really where it is, man. This backcourt, you almost wish you had more backcourt guys. You really do. You wish you had more guard depth so that you could play more guys back there that might be able to help you. And when you get into foul trouble, you would be able to have somebody else because it's just maddening. This is a team that, if you're going to succeed in this league, it feels like you have to shorten that rotation back to what we saw in that first year. And even then, I don't know. I think, and we've seen multiple people that have brought it up here, man, this team just continues to lack leadership. And honestly, I think not having Seth Trimble out there tonight really hurt. That was one that if he's in there, this game probably looks a lot different. But even without him in the game, you were looking at it and thinking, okay, well, this would probably be a game where the reason Carolina loses is because you don't have your best perimeter defender. A team really just goes off. Yeah, there were times where guys were able to get to the lane a lot easier than they would have if Seth Trimble was in there. But I do think that he is one of the few guys that actually talks on the floor. Now, again, it's not what we saw from Harrison Ingram. It's not what we saw from Cormac Ryan. And it feels like under Hubert Davis, that's really what you need. You need vocal guys on the floor. You need energy guys on the floor. Because you look at the two most successful seasons that he's had. It was last year with Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan, and his most successful year, based on how far they went in the NCAA tournament, was with Brady Manick. They don't have those guys on this year's team. And so until they find that guy, I don't really know what Carolina can do, because they don't have somebody that when things start to go wrong, that is that steadying presence that can calm everybody down. It should be RJ Davis, but part of it is that I don't really know what you can do if you're RJ. If you're talking to the team, if you're attempting to calm them down, and for some reason you're not the guy that they trust, then I don't know what you can do. But they don't seem to have that guy that that late in games really settles them down. And what's weird is you go back to last year, and maybe that was a guy like Harrison Ingram. Maybe he was just talking so much that he was basically just banging it into their heads that, guys, we're going to be okay. But the guy that should have had you confident last year down the stretch of games was RJ, because he was your best player. He was the guy that made shots. It doesn't feel like this team thinks that way this year. And I just don't know how you change the thinking, the wiring of this team. It's mental at this point. And until they can get out of that area and figure out how to be more confident, you're going to see slow starts, and you're going to see this team struggle to finish.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to see a guy be within your program for 5 years and not grow into the type of leader that his stats would suggest. All-time three-point field goal leader. He's chasing down to maybe be the all-time leading scorer here. And for whatever reason, he has not grown into a vocal leadership role.
Yeah, honestly, what I think of when I think of him, it's very similar to a guy like Jalen Brunson for the Knicks. Jalen Brunson is not a vocal leader for that team. But when you have a guy like Josh Hart, where Josh Hart maybe isn't the most skilled player, but he just really talks a lot and he's a motivator, I do think that that's kind of what we're seeing play out here. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you don't feel that. I feel that same way, where RJ's a guy that can score. He can carry you, and he's a guy you should believe in, but he's just not a super vocal guy. And that's okay. You can still be a really great player and not be vocal. You have to have somebody else on your team that is that force. And I don't think Carolina has it.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe that guy is Trimble. I thought they missed his presence tonight. They could have used another scorer. They also could have used someone to guard Chucky Hepburn, who scored 26 points, was 5 of 8 from the field, 16 of 20 from the foul line. He was the best player on the floor for either team. I did want to just show some love to Ian Jackson before we get to the Hubert of it all. 23 more points tonight, 7 of 15 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3 in 35 minutes. He's scoring the ball at a ridiculous clip, doing so efficiently. And tonight, I thought Debbie Antonelli, who has joined this podcast very frequently, might hear her voice on Friday morning, was a little too critical of some of the shots he did not make at the rim, because, and maybe I'm just so focused on the shot creation. His ability to create offense for himself is next level, and his handle at this level is ridiculous. And I think his ability to finish through contact is also very, very underrated. And he's emerging as the best player on this team. And a guy that, as much as I love RJ, I do think needs to be the focal point of what Carolina does offensively, because he's a better talent than what RJ Davis has to offer. And I hate it right now for him because he's playing really well individually, and we know how much he wants to win. And you're seeing the growth. I think he's becoming better defensively every time he takes the floor, but he's not being rewarded with it with wins. And I think it's just another example that I think we can still recruit good kids. We can still recruit high-end talent that want to come here and want to win. And right now, he's not being rewarded with that. But his growth, his development, his emergence over the last 2.5 weeks has been the most fun thing to watch about this team on a night-in, night-out basis.
And it's what makes you more angry with some of the performances that we've seen, because he's really started to show you why he was as highly rated as he was coming out of high school, why there are people pounding the table for him to be a starter for this team consistently, even when Seth Trimble ends up returning. He's this team's best player, man. I think it's safe to say that right now, because RJ tonight struggled a little bit. He's been more consistent as of late, but the way that he can create his own shot can over and over again, no matter who is on him defensively. I mean, the lay-ins that he was missing, it was because he was taking what most other guards would not really be able to create anything out of and finding a way to adjust his body and get a layup opportunity out of. He is as good of a scoring guard as we have seen here since Kobe White was here. And that really is saying a lot based on just being able to create on your own. Because RJ, I think there have been moments where he's been able to do that, but he's a guy that's definitely aided by being freed up on screens and everything like that. This dude is a freaking stud. And I'm hoping that with Trimble returning to the lineup, if he can give you what his season averages are, that will be enough to win Carolina most of these conference games. Because if you can do that, and who knows, as long you take care of business against a team like Pittsburgh, maybe you steal one of the road games from Pittsburgh, Clemson, or Duke, God forbid, then you have a chance to go into the ACC tournament feeling pretty good about where you are. This is one of the few reasons why you should feel like that. Maybe the only reason that you should feel like that, because it seems like every time that he comes out on the court, we're waiting for, okay, is there going to be a moment where he struggles a little bit? Who else has to take his place? Could this be the night where we finally see that? It doesn't seem to be happening. He's a guy that the rest of the year, I mean, hell, he could average 20 points a game the rest of the year because he's just playing that well. So the one area you want to see him continue to get better is free throw shooting. Again, tonight he ends up missing 4 free throws. That's the one area of his game that I think you can criticize at this point. Every other area of his game, I think, is carrying this team. And I'm excited to see where the rest of the season goes for him. It's just hopefully hopefully the rest of this team responds and starts matching the level of play that he's bringing each and every night.
All right, let's get to the not so fun part about tonight's episode. And look, when you're 8-6, I do think it's valid to start questioning what the head coach is doing and put some blame on what the head coach is doing, because 8-6 is okay at a lot of places. It's not acceptable here, and that's the reality that Hubert Davis is facing. And I do think after this loss, the noise around him is at the most negative that it's been. I would probably since 2 years ago, when you go from preseason number 1 to missing the tournament. We got a lot of people in on the chat, and we appreciate all those that have commented here on a live edition of the show. And I'll read off some of these. Myron Goodman, who was in my DM shortly after the loss. I put the blame on Hubert. You have to adjust your thinking and how you approach your game plan, and he has not. Josh Hunt, I put the blame on Hubert because there's no true big man, and this team can't control the paint. Our guy, Greg Ward, what's maddening is there's no adjustments in the game from Hubert. We rarely press, never play zone, and he refuses to play James Brown. I can go on and on about the people that have commented on here. Very, very angry with where the team is at, and in large part that having to do with head coach Hubert Davis. This isn't going away. Let's just, at 8-6, 1-1 in the league, unless they rip off 10, 12 straight wins, this will be a talking point after every loss. That's just the reality of the situation. And the other reality is this team isn't ripping off 10 to 12 straight wins. So hopefully, which means we can have this conversation again next week, 2 weeks from now. I don't know. Hopefully not. But I felt like tonight was the most vocal the fan base was. We are a show of the people. Let's sit here. Let's have the conversation. What's not helping matters is the fact that Wes Miller has built Cincinnati into a top 25 program. Yes, they lost on the road at Kansas State earlier this week. I know. I watched the game. He's also got a top 20 recruiting class that he's putting together at Cincinnati. You look at what Carolina has for next year. They've got 2 commits, no 5 stars, no big men. We all know what we think of where the front court is right now. When you look at where Carolina basketball is, how much blame does Hubert Davis deserve? Because I think it's fair to put some blame on him for in coaching. So some of the conversation I had with Myron was he was lamenting the fact that he got out coached by Pat Kelsey. Guys, that's not a bad thing. Pat Kelsey's a really good basketball coach. Pat Kelsey should have been in the ACC a long time ago. I'm not upset that my 4th-year head coach got out coached by a guy that's been doing it at a high level for 15-plus years, but is just now being able to do it at a power conference level. But when you look at the lack of adjustments, the rotations, the no press thing tonight was wild in the first half. I understood it in the second half. You pressed one time at the 8:47 mark. They call timeout that you forced, by the way, because you put the ball in the corner, and then you come out, you don't pick up full court the rest of the game. Like, I do understand that's something that it's okay to be frustrated with and okay to be critical of. So
right.
When you look at where we are now, how much blame does he deserve? And are we trending towards a situation and a conversation where his job status is coming into question?
Well, of course we are, because you're trending towards possibly being on the bubble again. And if you miss the tournament, that's it. I don't see how they keep you. It would suck, because I do think that this is a guy that there are a lot of people in the fan base that love him. that believe that he is a tutorial man. He's a good man. And I do think that will be incredibly difficult. But, man, there's a standard here. You got to make the NCAA tournament at the least. And I don't know. This is the thing that is you are always going to be hesitant about with him when it comes to having this conversation this early in the year, is that we thought this in his first year. There was a host on this show that fired him in the middle of his first year. I won't name names. But the thing is that with this team, I just don't know where that comes from. Who is that lightning bolt like Brady Manick that changes everything? And all of a sudden, Carolina is this different beast that teams simply can't handle. I don't know where that is. And the fact that, recruiting is not great, that this team is having issues in the transfer portal, I think really that is where you have to start looking and saying, how much do you blame Hubert? How much do you blame the NIL stuff? People simply not raising enough money. Carolina not being able to keep up as an athletic department. And if you believe that is really where Carolina is at, which there are people that are seeming to point to that actually being the case. I would need people to do more investigating that are actually tied in on campus and can actually do a lot of that stuff, have access to a lot of that stuff. If they dig deep and find out that, the NIL funds simply are not there, Carolina's not in great shape, then it's going to be hard to say, okay, just bring in another coach and all of a sudden things are going to change. Because I don't think that's necessarily the case. I don't think that this is a group of donors that is going to be super inspired by whoever it is. Wes Miller, I think, look, there's people that like Wes Miller a lot. Is it guaranteed to work? No. And then when you're bringing in an outsider, that's going to alienate some of the fan base as well, because it doesn't matter. There are people that look at this job and say, even if you believe that this is that this is one of the best jobs in all of sports, that you should be open to bringing in any candidate, there are going to be those people that are going to push back and say, I don't care that Hubert didn't work. You need to stick in the Carolina family. So I think that's what's going to make it really tough. And I think the other part of it is that, he brought in some guys this offseason that simply just are not working. And, in terms of changing what this team looks like, we've talked about it the last couple of years that he is trying to move towards what his system ultimately is going to be. Well, that transition is going to be difficult, especially when you're transitioning away from something that was comfortable for so many years, having a guy like Armando Bacot down low. So I think there's a lot of different factors that go into this, but I do think that now that conversation is starting to become more and more legitimate because we've got more to go off of. We know that it feels like every regular season we are here. At some point, we are talking about this team potentially not making the NCAA tournament. And that's not where this program should be at. Not year in, year out. I get that there's more parity in college basketball than ever before. I get that Carolina plays one of the toughest schedules in the country, it seems like, every single year. But you should not be entering conference play every year wondering, is this team going to find a way to turn it around and become a team that makes the NCAA tournament, and relying on a weak ACC in order to get there?
Yeah, this is a layered conversation. The fact of the matter is that 3 of the 4 years his program has not been a clear-cut NCAA tournament team. The other year, it was a number 1 seed in the tournament, won an ACC regular season title. But that's the expectation. That's the standard every year here. And he knew that when he took the job. That expectations did not go down. Demands not go down because of the changed sport. The sport changed overnight with the NIL and the transfer portal. And I think you could say he has done his very best to adapt to them. Like, he hasn't tried to not use the portal. He hasn't been against players making money. Like, Hubert Davis, I think, has adapted to what college athletics are right now in its current climate. Hasn't gotten the desired results that we've wanted, but this hasn't been Dabo. This hasn't been a guy that's been, I'm not going to get transfers. This hasn't been a guy that has spoken out about the players making money. With some of the connections that I have with people close to the program, there are big money people that are on the fence moving forward. If this is what we see the rest of the year and you miss the tournament twice in 4 years, I don't know. Does a run to the national title game in 1 year and a regular season title in another buy you time? Everywhere else, yes. I don't know if it does here. I really don't. And I'm part of the problem because my mandate is every year to put a Final Four team on the court. And that hasn't happened in 3 of the last 4 years. And you look at Roy Williams as the end of his career, that didn't happen in 3 of the last 4 years. He was Carolina's head coach. And so I just hate that we're here again because you look at Hubert Davis and he's the perfect blend and representation of what you wanted Carolina to be, the Carolina basketball to be post Roy Williams. Played for Dean Smith, was mentored by Roy. So he was a blend of the 2 greatest coaches in the history of your program. But it has not worked to the rate to where this is not going to be a conversation that we have to monitor for the rest of the season, which I'm going to tell you right now is no fun. Takes a lot of the air out of the season for us because how many times after they lose a game will this be what we're sitting here talking about? Like, I'd much rather be complaining about a lack of a defensive rebound or, whatever, as opposed to his job security. I'm comfortable talking about it because I fired him. Like, I'm not going to shy away from that. I still don't believe that he's the biggest problem. I think that if he has more NIL resources at his disposal, which I think that'll be something that Carolina will be committed to moving forward after what they did with the Bill Belichick hire on the football side of things. I think he'll have a much better job finding a big man. But it comes down to winning and winning at a high level. And with what Wes Miller is doing and what he's building at Cincinnati, it's only going to get louder because, that was everyone else's second choice. For me, my first choice. Because he was a guy that was a proven quality head coach with what he had done at UNC Greensboro. He was laying the groundwork. He was laying the foundation at Cincinnati, played for Roy Williams at Carolina. So he fit the mold of a Carolina guy. And I saw this coming up today or after the game where, well, guys, we need to go get Jay Wright to come out of retirement. We need to go get Nate Oates to leave Alabama. We need to go get X, Y, or Z to come coach the basketball program. The job will stay within the family. It's a family job. It's a familial job. And if you don't like that, then you're basically peeing on the grave of Dean Smith because that's what he wants. And that's what Roy Williams wants. So if Carolina fails with a Carolina guy, guess what they're going to do? They're going to go find another Carolina guy to try to fix it. And they've got track record of doing that correctly. When they failed with Matt Doherty, they went and brought in Roy Williams, 3 national titles, 5 Final Fours later. We were all pretty happy with the results. I don't want to sit here in March and have to talk about a head coaching search. I really don't. But if this trends the way that it's trending right now, and Carolina doesn't get the requisite wins in conference play to solidify themselves as an ACC tournament team, and he misses a tournament for a second time in 4 years, I don't know if his highs outweigh his lows. And I don't know with where the fan base will be at, if it'll be something that Bubba Cunningham would want to move forward with. And I don't know if there might be something where Roy Williams has to step in and intervene and say, hey, this is out of your control, but we got to make a change here. I hope we're not doing that in March, but it's on the table. And the only way to rid that is for Carolina to win, and to win a lot, and to win at a high level over the next 2.5 months. And that's my hope. And that's my prayer. Because as someone that openly fired him and said that we made a mistake, one of the last things I want to do is do a podcast talking about one of the kindest, sweetest men in the world, a man that coaching needs. College athletics needs Hubert Davis. They need the role model that he is. I don't want to talk about that man losing his job. And I don't want to have to worry about him going through the things that Matt Doherty went through and him having a stained relationship with a program that means so much to him. And that's all that very much would be on the table if he were to be fired. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully Carolina wins a whole lot of games the rest of the way. They make the tournament, have some success, and we can continue to build onward and upward under Hubert Davis. With that, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. Before we let you go, we encourage you guys to visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. The recap article has been written. It'll be posted and shared. I'll put it out tomorrow morning for you guys that are still on vacation to go back and read about the loss, or even maybe while you're at work. But the recap article will be up on the website. I'll be back later in the week getting you ready for the game at Notre Dame on Saturday morning as I continue to take you through the Carolina basketball season. Carolina football still working the transfer portal. An article up on the website about them being interested in a duo coming out of USC. Portal stuff will pick back up later this week. And, of course, we'll have you covered on all that as well. And it appears that Bill Belichick has zeroed in on Freddie Kitchens being his offensive coordinator. You can read about that on the website. Simply put, guys, we want you to go there every single morning, every afternoon, and every evening for the latest and the best Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball season. We want to thank you guys for a successful 2024. We finished with over 74,700 downloads. And we can't wait to see the love that you show us here in 2025. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. Well, with that, guys, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.